Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. My guest today is Mr. Anthony Messina. Anthony, why don't you kind of introduce yourself? Let people know who you are.
Hello, my name is Anthony. I am a fulfillment coach, and I started on this path a couple months back. I was at the verge of a breakup at the time, and in that, I kind of pushed into the space of coaching. I decided I wanted to be a relationship coach, and having no experience, I decided I needed a coach as well. And so I jumped into that process with a coach, and he helped me get the boat set in the right direction. I kind of went in kind of blind, and I said, okay, I don't want anyone to make these mistakes that I've made that almost crashed the relationship. Um, when we stepped back, we started to do some somatic work and stuff. It really came down to a lot of external pieces outside of me that I was looking to piece together to build this life that I wanted. When in reality, a lot of what we want in this life is to achieve certain feelings, achieve certain states of being throughout our life. And a lot of us will look to the outside world for all these pieces when in reality, we need to build like a inner fortress at first. We need to build all this stuff inside of us, get clarity, build a state of, for most people, I believe, inner peace, then go outside of the world and accomplish the things you want, first having fulfilled yourself on the inside, having that state of inner fulfillment, which comes from a strong place of self-love and inner peace. And most people have so much searching for external validation like I did. And what I realized in that was my happiness, my fulfillment was all coming from the outside world. I had to get X, Y, and Z to build this perfect life, which I built a life I did love. And it came toppling down to some degree. And that's when it was like, okay, let me step back and let me dive in. And it's not a destination, it's a journey. It's a lifelong one. And we all have past traumas, and we have these wounds within us that, have us to where we're at today, the way we engage with the world and stuff. And digging in, seeing that, and figuring out what we really want out of all this is, I think, the best place to start. And I think a lot of us are searching outside for peace, for love, for fulfillment, and all that.
Can totally relate, man. Coming from a 12-step perspective, which is kind of my spiel here, right? Looking outside is all addicts really do, right? We look for the solution to everything is found through one simple thing, right? In my case, right, I was of course, I still am, sex addict. So anything that could fill that hole, I just went to that one void because it was so easy and numbing and calming. And all I did was look externally. I never knew that it's this internal world that really matters. So my first two questions, which I heard, were one, what really is a fulfillment coach? Because I feel like a lot of people don't really understand what that is. And then two, from a young man's perspective, what do a lot of young guys, especially nowadays, get wrong about fulfillment?
Yeah, so and to be specific, I call it inner fulfillment. And that is simply it's helping people to find the inner peace within themselves. And a lot of that is going to come from self love. A lot of what we seek in the outside world are stuff that we should first be providing ourselves. For example, the relationship. All of the love I ever wanted was coming from that person. And all of us like to say, oh, yeah, I love myself. But what are the things that are going through in your mind on a daily basis? What are the limiting beliefs, the different thoughts, the things that creep up, those dark spiders and everything that are crawling around? Those are the true beliefs you have about yourself. And a belief is just a thought that you repeat over and over and over. And so if you have a thought in your head like, I don't want to get rejected, I don't want to get rejected, I don't want to get rejected, I'm not enough, I'm not enough, I'm not enough, that's how you feel. That's your belief about yourself. I'm not enough. I feel like I'm not enough. I'm going to get rejected. So those feelings that we create for ourselves are basically our truth. And that shows a lack of self-love. If you have a full and complete self-love for yourself, you're not sitting here constantly thinking, oh, I'm not enough. Oh, I'm worried about this, or I need this person to be happy. I need this thing to be happy. It's inner peace because you're so at peace with simply yourself. And something that is really started to, hit heavy about, and I did mention that I almost went through a breakup. A month ago, I did go through that breakup. I prolonged it a little bit, but it ended up happening. And Jay Shetty, in his book Think Like a Monk, talks a lot about the law of impermanence. And it's a Buddhism principle, and that is everything outside of us is impermanent. The money, the family, the cars, the friends, the job, the career, like all of it is impermanent. All of that can go away at any time. And we can sit here and say, like, oh, my wife's going to be here forever, whatever. Hopefully. But you literally never know when she could be gone the next day. Like, that's the full, honest truth. No matter how much belief you have in that person, there's things outside of you that can take them away. But you always have yourself. And you are your own permanence. So when you build that self-love, you build those feelings inside of yourself, they never go away. Now, it's something you have to keep working on. It's a lifelong process, but you are all you truly ever have. And so building that fortitude inside of you of self-love and peace is the most beautiful thing you can do. And what most young guys get wrong that I see from my point of view is exactly what I was doing, which is building the outside world and getting all these blocks in place to create the life. I had the high-rise apartment that I've always wanted to live in downtown. I got that. I had the beautiful girl that I'd been with for 4 years, assumed marriage. Great. Traveled every month. Had a business that allowed me the freedom to travel every month, provided income. I was putting money in savings. Like, I was checking all the boxes off for the dream life that I'd always pictured. And it wasn't until started that foundation started to crumble that I was like, okay, what are we doing? And I attributed a lot of it to laziness and, being really content with where I was. But the reality of it was I was so anchored to the external world, and I didn't have the inner peace that would allow me to find happiness without all that. I needed those things, and I found out that I had a really big dependency on my partner. And um, I think God has a plan for us. I think everything happens for a reason, and I think all of that happened to bring me right to where I'm at right now.
Couldn't agree more, man. As I've kind of gone on this journey, I've had a lot of moments where I've thought, "Oh, I'm going the right way," and then you hit a roadblock, and as my mom likes to say, right, it's an obstacle in the right direction, right? And when you start thinking like that, and the universe is working for you, even when it gives you roadblocks, things start to kind of move in a little different way when you know it's your life. You almost get to be in the flow, right? And you can just kind of go with it instead of having to hold on to the railing so tight. Especially for me, I could remember holding on so tight. I thought, I was gonna die. But a couple times it was how do I have to be perfect to get to this perfect life, right? It's almost impossible to try and do X, Y, Z by yourself all the time perfectly, right? And that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself. And I see tons of young guys do that. Me in particular, being a high achiever and like type A and the whole shebang, I was not pretty to myself in my head, right? And I've had to slowly unwind that voice and then put in the voice and listen. And it's a conscious choice. And some days I still struggle with it, making that conscious choice to listen to the higher power voice, to listen to the good perspective, to be kind to myself. So if there's a guy out there who's listening who says, Anthony, I was born this way and there's nothing I can do to change the texture of my inner mind, what would you say?
First off, that's a belief they have. And the belief they have is based on thoughts that they're always telling themselves. We can always rewire our brain. At the root of who we are, we have some genetic things that are likely not going to change much, but for the most part, that's a mindset that I'm never going to change X, Y, and Z. And, there's some people that they don't want to change. And the truth is, if there are people who are stuck in their way, and as a coach, the biggest thing I've had to learn is you can't help someone who doesn't want to change. And some people will come to you just to complain. The other day I was speaking with this gentleman, very nice guy and everything, and I said, "Do you believe that it's possible for this to change?" And he said, "No, the world is a messed up place. I can't find peace in this." And that's a belief that he has. He didn't want to change that, didn't want to shift. And I said, we kind of parted ways, and you can't change someone's mind if they don't want to change. They have to have the initial trigger. Oh, I want to change this. I believe that this can change. Because if you don't believe it can change, it can't change. Your belief is the first thing that needs to be there for any change to happen in your life. If I don't believe that I can get in shape, then my actions are going to follow that belief. But if I'm like, oh, I know for certain that I can get to the gym and get in the best shape of my life, and I strongly believe that can happen. Absolutely. But you got to have the belief in everything you do. It's not always easy, but simple practices such as starting with affirmations and just telling yourself that every day, priming the subconscious mind to believe whatever it is that you want to start to see change in. And I've only been at it for a couple months, but somebody I spoke with in one of my first conversations came around. I told him, hey, do some affirmations and come back to me whenever you're ready. And just in those affirmations, he came back to me, and I could sense the energy difference. Like his entire belief around what he thought was possible was completely different. Was it just because of the affirmations? I'm not sure, but I left him with the intent of just doing affirmations and coming back to me when he feels like he's at a different place. And simple things like that, just to program our subconscious mind, are extremely powerful.
So how would you go about doing that specifically? Like give us an example. Morning, night, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, like journaling, reading. How exactly would someone do that?
Yeah, so first off, I would figure out what you really want to feel in your life. The first time my coach asked me this, I gave him the XYZ of the external world. And we had to keep diving deeper. I didn't know those answers off the top of my head. And so if any of you out there are listening and you don't know what you want to feel off the top of your head, it's understandable. And even when I started to sense the things I wanted to get all this stuff in place and get complacent because I wanted to feel peace. And I think for most of us, we want to feel a sense of peace inside of us. The idea, especially as a young guy, is like always going and chasing and running after things. Like that's a lot. That's a lot of energy coming out of us. And the big thing that this was kind of a breakthrough in the last week, was everything I've ever done has been chasing. It's always been about getting. And what I realized in the last week was the switch that needed to be made there was I need to start attracting. I need to start having the energy that brings this stuff to me. And that kind of thing is done through affirmations. And so if you were to structure some affirmations, for example, what I do, what has been working fairly well, I have a small whiteboard. It's a little bigger than a piece of paper. And I figured out 5 superpowers that the future version of myself has. And, one of them was being cordial, making people feel complete love and energy and, when they're approached. Another mine was being at peace. And that comes from a state of surrendering and trusting versus trying to always control. So I got 5 different things, have those on the top of the board, I am statements. And then on the bottom half of the board, I had 5 more things that are kind of rotating. And these are things that throughout the week I feel myself having limiting beliefs around. So those 5 things up top, those kind of stay the same. Those are kind of my northern lights. Those are the things that, like, okay, this is the direction of my life. It's kind of a grand scheme. It's probably not going to change a lot. And it's how I want to show up as a person. The 5 that I have down on the bottom are like, okay, at the end of the week, what have I been struggling with this week? This last week, I was struggling a lot with, what was one of them? One of them was coaching in general. I just, I'm new to the space, and I go to the brotherhood, I go to the men's group, and there are people who have been doing it for their 20 years, most of my life. And so I feel that sense of I'm not good enough. I don't have that experience. I don't have that. And it's a limiting belief that creeps in and kind of steals that inner peace away from me. And just being aware of those things is literally the first step. So my affirmation around that is I am a phenomenal coach and I transform people's life with my story that people can personally connect to. It doesn't matter how much experience I have. If you're hearing my story and you can relate to it, and even if I'm one step ahead of you, if I'm one step ahead of you and you can follow my path, and your path does not have to be the same, but if you can learn from my path at least, then I can help you. I can support you in your journey. I can help guide you. And so that was one of the affirmations. So the 5 bottom were the antithesis of the limiting beliefs that I've been, feeling throughout the week. And the top 5 were I am statements around who I want to be as a person. Because when you step into that, who you want to be as a person, a lot of fulfillment comes from that. If I want to be, I feel like a lot of people make the excuse, I'll be a really giving and loving person once I have enough money or I'm in a relationship or this. It's like, no. Whoever you want to be, like who's that person you want to be in 5 years? You might not have all the external resources they have right now, but I guarantee you can start acting like that person today. And if you start priming your subconscious with affirmations and doing that, you'll be a lot closer.
Dude, couldn't agree more. I mean, I think a lot of guys struggle in the sense that it's painful to really connect with those emotions. We're not taught, right, from a young age to really deal with them or how to handle them or take a look at them. So we just assume, at least in my experience, that these are the laws of the land. Whatever our internal beliefs are like in stone. We have a saying in SAA that says, no matter how far down the scale you have fallen, your story can be a light to others, right? A benefit to others. And I've heard stories that are mind-boggling, but they were so impactful to me, right? Even if the other person was like, "Oh, it's just my life. It doesn't really mean that much." That's a self-limiting belief in itself because I personally, I've struggled with that belief that, "Oh, my story has not been that impactful or enlightening or people can learn from it." And I go to the groups or I connect with a lot of these guys like MPB or Rising Man or all that, and I share my story, and I have guys come to me after and be like, "Man, that really helped. Like, your share kind of gave me an insight." And it's like, "Oh, wow." The stuff you tell yourself in your head is rarely the stuff that actually goes on in reality. So there seems to kind of be a misconception. So why do you think we have all these self-limiting beliefs? Like, where do they come from internally? Are they already there when we're born, or do they get imposed on us by people who are older than us or negative experiences in our life? Where do you think they really come from?
Yeah, I would like to say that most of these things are originating outside of us. As we grow up, it's the little things in life that will have such profound effects as we grow up. And sometimes it's not little, sometimes it's huge events, but even little things. And other day I did a microdose with some shrooms, blindfolded myself, eye mask on, headphones on, and laid down for 3 hours. Silence and just let my mind go wherever it wanted to go. And in that, I had 2 kind of journeys in it. The second part of it, though, took me to a bunch of past experiences. And I was having this feeling in my gut. And It's not why I did it, but I had this and I'd been accepting it. It's there, it's going to go away. But in that journey, I kind of went back to a bunch of these places in my life where I had forms of rejection, from places like I was a kid in middle school. I wanted to join band, and my mom said, "No, you're not joining band. No, you're going to be a sports player." Okay, cool. I didn't think much of it. Went to sports, sat on the bench, didn't play. Different breakups, like middle school. Like this stuff doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of life. But and most of this stuff I didn't even recall. But it took me back to all of these points and showing me where I had been rejected. And one of the things I'm struggling with throughout the breakup process was this state of rejection. And the woman I broke up with, love her with my whole heart. It wasn't a matter of me not being enough. It's simply we're on different pages. And that she's reaffirmed that a lot. She's a great person. She's a coach as well. And it's not a sense of rejection, but it feels like that. It's almost impossible not to feel like that. But understanding that, feeling those things as they come up, addressing them, like, oh, I'm feeling sad. Understand this is not a form of rejecting me. It's a redirection. And all the rejections we face in life are simply a redirection. If you go to talk to this person, you want to go talk to a girl, and she says, "No, I'm not interested." Most guys will either let that beat them up and, "Oh my God, I'm not enough," whatever. Some guys will keep trying to, pierce the armor, get in, whatever. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But trying to force that and or taking that as super personal, I don't think either of those are the right way. When you go and you have somebody who doesn't want to talk with you, be with you, get to know you, look at that as a simple redirection. They're not supposed to be in your life. It's easy to say outside of the moment when you're not in it. But anyways, I went through all these different rejections, and in my mind, I'm telling myself, I'm not enough. I'm not going to find love again. I'm not, whatever. These are the limiting beliefs that, surrounded my head and the breakup process. And that experience, did like some quantum healing and went back and gave myself affirmations in those moments from the person I am today. Gave that younger version of myself a hug and said, "Hey man, I'm here for you. I love you. I see you. I accept you." And fixing that moment in the past. And I came out of that and like such a sense of peace. It's crazy. And there's other ways to do that without that experience, but for me that worked really well, and it was tackling those limiting beliefs. But all of those came from outside forces. It wasn't people telling me I wasn't enough. It was somebody telling me, "Oh, you can't do this," or I was in football, I wasn't good. It was my first time ever, so my coach didn't play me. He didn't tell me, "You're not good enough. You suck." Any of that. It was simple and active life. I internalized it as I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, whatever. And years down the road, those things still creep in and affect our limiting beliefs of who we might be. And, I think limiting beliefs are external things that we internalize as things about us. And in most cases, it's not an attack on who we are or anything like that, but we make it personal.
Hmm. Yeah, when you really think about that, man, right? It's you let the external world influence your internal world, which then reflects the external world that previously happened instead of the internal world that you want, right? It's so much as you can run from rejection for the rest of your life if you want. And I know some guys who jump headfirst into rejection, almost to seemingly like numb the pain of rejection. You ever seen that before? The guys who just keep going girl to girl to girl to girl to girl, and they almost like numb to it, but it's
Hmm.
almost like someone rejected them and they're almost trying to prove to themselves that they don't really feel it and they keep going, and it's almost a self-destructive behavior. So I think rejection is important. right? Not so much as learning to numb it, but learning to embrace the sense that, like you said, it's a redirection, right? This is not the path. This is not the way of the river. It's you're bumping up against a rock and it's going to hurt a little bit because you're going to scrape your arm and then you're going to go a little bit to the right and then you're right back on track. But so many guys get caught in the bumping the rock because I think it really bruises their ego, right? Because so many men have this massive inflated ego. And I think it's a lot to do with they feel so insecure about what they've accomplished at such a young age, right? It's mostly young guys that I've seen that have a super inflated ego because they have not accomplished enough at 23, 24, 18. I see a lot of this success culture, grind set, and you're expected to have it figured out at 23, right? You're expected to have your life purpose and have the penthouse, have the girl, and like that's a lot of pressure at 23 or 18 or even 27. That's a lot of pressure. Um, so I think a lot of guys are chasing happiness, right? Happiness is the big thing, and I did want to kind of get your perspective on: is there a difference between happiness and fulfillment, or are they the same thing?
Yeah, so happiness is an emotion. And more than ever, I've realized that we as human beings have a full spectrum of emotions, and everything we feel is valid. And especially throughout this breakup process, there has been such a wide variety of emotions. I have felt the deepest sadness I've ever felt. I felt some of the deepest anger, but I've also had some liberation, like a sense of freedom, like a wow, I can do this, I can do that, and also liberation. And I'm going to focus on myself and like just all these different emotions that are coming, and we have to feel these things. And feeling our feelings it's literally the name of it. And this is a form of rejection that many people do to themselves is they reject their feelings. They push them down. You go through a hard time, and what I see with most people during breakups when they're unconscious is they start to sit with the sadness. Oh, this does not feel good. Okay, let's get to the bar. Let's go drink. Okay, let's go hook up. Let's go whatever. And I'm not shaming these people, to each their own. But when we suppress those feelings, when we hide it, that's how we cause trauma. And if we don't let those feelings be felt, we can never heal from it. Yesterday at church, they said, you must face it and feel it in order for God to heal it. And, even if whoever's listening, if you're not religious, if you're not spiritual, you need to heal it. You heal it through the work you do with yourself. But in order to do that, you have to face it and you have to feel it. And so chasing happiness and having happiness is not a bad thing. It's one of the best feeling emotions we have. But the fixation on it can feel weird because that's an emotion that you experience part of the time and hopefully most of the time. But you also have these feelings of sadness and anger and frustration and grief and other joy, other feelings of not necessarily happiness on the positive side of things. And so it's not something that you have necessarily all the time. If you're always happy, your happiness is kind of dulled. But if you have really dark times, which everyone does, you have the deep sadness, the deep anger, the deep gloom, all of that. That makes the happiness like so much better when you get there. But if your life's perfect, if you live your life every day like you're just nothing but happy, as much as that sounds like that'd be the best thing ever, in reality, it's going to be a flat line. And the truth is, life is a roller coaster of emotions. Hopefully, it's mostly happy, but the truth is, it's really not. And if you live in happiness most of the time, you're probably not going to get nearly as much growth as if you went through some shit. So on the other side of things, fulfillment is actually a state of being, and you can feel fulfilled internally while you're going through all of these different emotions. And I believe that that inner fulfillment, and I don't know if everyone is quite the same, but from what I've seen with most people, when diving down into it, most people seek a sense of inner peace, inner calm, inner this, where it's like a stillness. And I think that's beautiful for your nervous system. And so that state of being can be accomplished all the time. That's the goal. Now, is you step in and step out of it at times? Yeah. But when you get in like a routine state of being fulfilled internally, you're not looking for outside validation. You're not worrying so much about all these things outside. You're not trying to control. You're living in a state of peace. You're living in a state of surrender and see what happens to you. You live in a state of attracting things as opposed to this control that, especially as young men, we try and control the circumstances so hard. And there's a lot of trust and surrender that come with that. And that's one of the biggest things I've learned in the last couple months. And when I stepped back and I was like, I'm done trying to control. I'm going to surrender. I know God is doing this for a reason. And the first time I told myself that, I don't think I believed it. But over time, as that sat in, and I started to just step back and kind of watch and be like, oh shit, this is actually happening for me. This wouldn't have happened. This wouldn't have happened. This wouldn't have happened. When you truly start to believe, you can literally see how it's working for you. Doesn't mean it's all easy, but it's for the greater good of you and your human experience.
Yeah, I think I saw the quote once that you can convince yourself of anything, whether a God exists or doesn't, right?
Yeah.
If you go looking for the proof. And that simple perspective shift of I'm choosing, and I think a lot of people, especially guys, don't understand it's a choice, right? It's a choice to wake up and be like, there is something working for me. I may not see it, I may not be able to talk to it, I may not even be able to feel it at times. Honestly, this week I've been struggling with it. I've been struggling with it, man. Really like seeing and feeling it where I'm at. And I keep having to make that conscious choice of just surrender. And it's not easy. It's not easy, especially as guys, right? Having to let go of the reins because we're so like, I'm large, I'm in charge, man. I got this shit. I can do it, right? It doesn't it doesn't really work when you try that, right? Because it's gonna buck and kick and you just get exhausted and burned out and you're chasing and you never get there, right? Like a year ago when I started this journey and I really embarked on letting go and letting the universe do what it needs to do for me. And just, I changed one thing in my life. All I did was get sober. That's all I did. Most growth I've ever had in my entire life in a year. Massive growth in 1 year by doing one thing, which is letting go, right? Letting go to get more control. Because if I can control what I can control, it's a lot smaller and I can start to build that fulfillment in my life, right? And I think that's a thing most people don't understand is you have to build it, right? It's building a mindset, building practices to bring fulfillment into your life. It's not going to just come to you. You do have to work a little bit, right? It's the 80-20 rule, right? 80% of the gains come from 20% of the work. So what have you done to build fulfillment in your life? Like, what are some practices? A guy who has no idea what he's doing, he's just starting. He's like, Anthony, I have no idea how to go about building happiness, fulfillment, anything. Like, what are a couple easy internal practices, meditative practices, whatever you think he could be like, okay, I can start to slowly implement these things?
So here's a controversial starting point, and I love this, but think about everything in your life you cherish and let it go. Like, imagine just something devastating happen. The show Last Man on Earth, or I believe that's what it's called. Guy is literally the last guy on Earth. And it's hard as heck to even imagine a life like that with no people. Like, for most people, for myself, for sure. And like, when I even imagine that, I'm like, I would have no reason to live. Like when I first started to process that, and it's like, but why is that? Like why are the other people, why do they define how I feel? Like just their presence of them in the world. So even just thinking about that, the worst case scenario, and then imagine like starting over and everything. Like I lost my business, I lost my job, I lost all this, I lost all this. Imagine you lost everything, and what would you do? Like what would you do at that point where you've lost everything? Because the truth is, then you have yourself. All you focus on is you, and you get real and raw with yourself. And I read a quote last week, I reposted it, and it said, loneliness is being alone and not loving yourself. Solitude is being alone and being in love with yourself. And so so last weekend, actually, Friday was one of the toughest days since the breakup. It's about a month out. It was a very tough day. All weekend I spent in solitude. Sunday I went to church in the morning, and then the second half of Sunday was silence. Like no music, no podcast, no nothing. And I literally just spent time on myself. And it was so refreshing. It was so relaxing. Do I want to do that all the time? No, absolutely not. But I was like, let me sit with that and sit with the idea that it's just me, only me. And that would be a great practice for people, is spend some time in solitude. Go out, go rent a cabin in the middle of nowhere and just spend the weekend with yourself. Do what you like to do the things you enjoy. Spend time learning about yourself. Spend time just looking yourself in the mirror, like knowing who you are. I don't think most people know who they are deep down. So that's probably a controversial place to start, but I think that's really good. Some activities for the inner fulfillment, I would say, would just be diving down into your beliefs and values. I think when we live in congruence with our beliefs and values about life, I think we start to feel so much more fulfilled. And so many people are so, construed by the outside world. And like, look at all the beliefs and values you have around life and identify each of those. Like, write them all down on a piece of paper and look where each of those came from. And yeah, you learn from other people. There are absolutely things I've learned from other people that have changed my life, and they align with what I believe. They make sense for me and all that. That's great. But chances are you've probably taken things from people in your life, especially like parents, that don't necessarily align with you or anything, but you just adopted that belief, you adopted that value, you took it for fact, you applied it to your life, and you live in this way that you believe is aligned with you, but by not living in congruence with your true belief, your true value, you're just living out of someone else's, you're going to create an unease inside of you. When you're doing things that aren't easy, like that don't naturally flow with who you are, you're going to create this feeling inside of you that's going to take you away from fulfillment. There's going to be a lack of inner peace. Another thing for the inner fulfillment would be the looking at all your limiting beliefs, looking at all the things that you find yourself saying about yourself, and start to rewire those to align with your beliefs, your values, and in a positive manner, in a manner that attracts energy. And one of the most powerful things is literally, and Joe Dispenza talks about this a lot, is living in the energy that you want to attract. Because if you're saying, I want to get money, I want to get money, I want to get money, but the internal state inside of you is lack, like I'm saying all of this out of lack, then I'm just going to attract more lack. And it's just the way the energy works. But if you start to truly treat yourself like you are a stature of wealth, and you live in that state of being, you live in a state of abundance, the way that you treat money, you treat things, you treat your time like it's valuable, you start to just act in that way, that is going to be the energy that's going to be drawn to you. The things that aren't energetically aligned with you are naturally going to space away from you. So I would recommend, just fine comb through your life and looking at the limiting beliefs and rewriting those and figuring out the energy that you want to live in.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think another thing to add to that too is take a fine comb around who's around you in your life, right? Especially like dating or friends. That energy is hugely impactful on your fulfillment. I've noticed in my life, right? The people I hang out with reflect the energy I want to have, even when sometimes I don't have it, right? If I am lacking it on one of those days, because everyone has those days, I can go to them and be like, "Hey guys, I'm really struggling with believing the universe has my back today. Like, kind of help me out here." And I'll get the energy I usually projected them back to me. The, hey, man, it's there. You're just having a bad day. Like, we got you. And they'll keep supporting you up. But I used to have the friends who would be like, damn, man, that sucks. It's always life is like that, and they would pull you down more. And having to fight to get out of that gravitational field is fucking hard. It is hard, right? And then even in dating, right? That's even more hard. I think a lot of guys take on that provider protector role and they got a lot of fulfillment out of that. But when that goes away and they haven't built this external support system of, fulfillment, when it's almost like you're building reserve fulfillment tanks in other people, right? Like you're like, hey, like, oh, I'm a little low today. Let me come over here and talk to you, and I'll get a little more of me. And when you need it, I'll give some to you, right? You're filling into other people, and they're pouring into you, and it's a very beautiful and beneficial relationship. But what happens with dating is I see a lot of guys, all they do is pour, 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 and they don't expect anything in return, right? Because they're just like, oh, I'll be the martyr. I don't, I'll just sacrifice myself to protect and provide and get all this fulfillment out of this relationship. And that goes away and they crumble, right? And they're like they're left standing there at the end of the finish line, like, where's everyone? I won the race. Where'd everyone go? Right. And it's so prevalent, right? Even in not even in dating, but in hookup culture, right? I see a lot of guys give up in fulfillment in dating and they go to hookup culture and they just degrade themselves in the pursuit of external validation, right? And having to flip that internally is painful, right? I mean, I don't know about your experience, but for me, having to like look at yourself in the mirror and be like, damn, this is where I'm at. These are all my failings. Fucking hurts. Like really hurts to go, this, and this, and start to change it. Right. So if a guy's struggling to look himself in the mirror, what would you say to him? Like, what is the first couple small baby steps to like becoming conscious and not, letting life drag you through and you just end up at a life you're not filled with?
Yeah. So, and my process of becoming conscious, I realized there was a lot of things that I did and was not necessarily not proud of, but it was my journey from boyhood to manhood. And I was quite gracious with myself. And that would be my biggest recommendation to people is be gracious with yourself. And I see so many people who they get in this journey of self-development, of growth, of becoming aware. And what they do is they look back at the past version of themselves with resentment, with anger, with frustration. What the hell was I thinking? Oh my God, this was so stupid. I've made some mistakes. I don't think I've made any catastrophic mistakes in life, but I who knows? My relationship could be still existent. Had I been the person that I am right now a year ago, genuinely believe it would still be there. And that's a hard pill to swallow. I can look back at myself and be angry. I can hate on myself. I can be all of these things. Or I can look back at myself at that time with grace and accept the fact that at the time I was doing the best with what I had, with what I knew, with what experience I had, because that's all we're ever doing. When you made that decision a year ago, whatever it was a bad decision, changed the course of your life. At the time, you thought it was the best decision. You might have known it wasn't a great one, but you thought it was the best one you had at the time. And you can live your life with regret, anger, frustration towards that moment, or you can look back and be like, he was just a young kid trying to make it, trying to do X, Y, or Z, and that's it. And so starting with grace towards the past version of yourself is hands down one of the most important things. Because if you can't forgive yourself for the past, then you are simply stating that your future is not going to be any better. When you tie yourself to that past, you're locking yourself there. And some people actually sabotage themselves because they will stop themselves from future opportunities intentionally because the past or current version of them doesn't deserve that. And that's quite literally the exact opposite of growth. You're stopping the opportunity to become a better person because you weren't a better person back then. And so have grace with yourself. Understand that awareness is the first step. So the fact that you're simply aware, like you look yourself in the mirror one day, you're like, I hate the guy looking in the mirror right now. That's a big step. That's awareness that I assume you didn't have before. You were aware entirely of the fact that the person in front of you is not the person you want to be. And you have two directions you can go from there. You have a lot more, but you have a good direction or you can keep going on the same path. And so the self-awareness is important. So recognize and accept yourself and love yourself for the fact that you're at this pivotal point in your life and you can go one of two directions. And I hope you go with the option to improve and to become better and step into the version of yourself you know you should be. Now, if you take that point and you're conscious and you say, I know I have a point right now that I can make a pivotal change in my life, and you go right back to the spot you were before, that's hard. But if you choose the one path to go upwards and you make mistakes and you do that, be gracious because we're not going to be perfect. And this journey where I've become more conscious, I've started to, even my ex-partner, we still have the same apartment together, until she moves out. And she's noticed big changes. And, I've noticed changes in her too. And like, we're both growing from this and we both still have love for each other. And the fact that we can grow from this is so important. So wherever you're at, understand that you can grow, forgive yourself for the past, and appreciate the awareness, the newfound awareness you have. Maybe you don't know the next steps, but if you have a destination, I guarantee if you sit down long enough and think, you know at least one of the moves to make. You might not have the whole map, but I know at least one thing I need to do to get over there.
It's small steps, small baby steps is what I've learned, right? It's every day, just one little thing, one little thing, and one little thing, and one little thing, and then it compounds, and it's like a massive breakthrough for like a ton of progress in a month, and then it's small baby steps again. What do you think about stagnation? Is stagnation part of the process?
I think most people are going to have stagnation in their life. I dropped out of college. When I dropped out, I kept going with this business I'd already started, a moving business, and I was hungry. And I was going. I was working like manual labor. I was moving and all this. I built a team and all this. And I got into a relationship, or I was already in it, but I got to a point in the relationship where I got stagnant. And honestly, a lot of my relationship I spent stagnant. I've had my moving business for years I've wanted to get out of and done these little small steps into like building a business. I dip my toes in and I'd stop. I'd dip my toes in, I'd stop. I'd dip my toes in, I'd stop. And I was stagnant because I had something that I was externally validated in. I was like, oh, I'm good here, I'm good here, I'm good here. And it was a incredibly pivotal part of my journey, but I had to realize the stagnation was there. If you're in stagnation and you don't realize it, it is one of the darkest poisons. But if you can step back and be like, oh shit, I haven't moved in a long time, or this last month has been super slow, or I'm not making any progress, if you can be aware of it, it's super powerful. I don't know if it's a part of everyone's journey, but I think most people have points of stagnation. And again, if you do realize that, you say, oh, you step back and not enough has changed, I didn't reach my goals, I haven't done anything, have some grace with yourself. And I just looked at myself as like, hey man, I was young 20s, I was making good money, I was living the life. I was like I loved my life every step of the way. Maybe not for the best of reasons. It was all like a lot of external stuff, but I loved my life, I enjoyed it. I cherished those times. There's no reason to poison that period of my life with regret, resentment, or anything like that. But I'm aware enough now to step back and be like, I don't want to fall back into that trap of being stagnant. So I think it's not necessarily part of everyone's journey. I think it's common. And if you can build awareness around it to stop yourself from staying there, then, it's part of the journey.
So what are some guardrails?
Accountability partners, to say the least. Just all around awareness. Getting clear on the things you actually want in life. A lot of what I preach about is the internal. So if you're listening and all your goals are external, start to build some internal goals, start to look inwards. And everyone's goals are so different in what they have. So it'd be hard to say any like things that are universal, but I think having an accountability partner is really big. Somebody that knows where you want to go, what you want to do, keeping in touch with them, keeping in line with them. That's extremely powerful, and hopefully, most people have that. A innate sense of accountability and responsibility for oneself. I think that's really big. So here's one. I'd recommend that anyone who feels like that to step back and maybe see where in life you might be placing blame elsewhere. Something I know with a friend of mine, they love to blame everything in life that happens on something else. They're not at this point in their life because somebody did something, because this person didn't do this didn't do this. And almost every time something comes up, there's no accountability taken for it. So if you can't find accountability in all of it, if nothing's ever your fault, then you're simply assuming that you can't change anything because nothing's your fault. And it's kind of the flip side of the control, because we do have to surrender and trust God in some ways, but we have to co-create with God. God has a plan for us, but we have to be building. We have to be doing the work. You can't just put your hands up and Jesus take the wheel. You gotta put in work too, and it's gotta be aligned action. So figure out what you want. Make sure you're being fully responsible for yourself. And an extra layer of protection is finding an accountability partner, someone who will lift you up, and just getting in the right spaces, going to the brotherhood. I leave that workout and I'm like ready to kill the week, because I'm just surrounded by people who are like so freaking loaded with energy and want to like create such a profound impact on the world. So community is really big too. Simply, motivation isn't everything. If you have to turn on motivational videos every day to get yourself going, then you probably don't have any intrinsic motivation. But having a community of accountability partners, motivation, and inspiration, that's really powerful too.
Intrinsic motivation, I think, is probably the most important thing a guy needs to reach his goals, right? Because you can have all the external motivation you want, and as soon as that comes crumbling down, it don't mean squat, right? And having that is such a powerful thing. And I really felt like I've gotten it the more I've gone into this journey, right? The more conscious you get, the more you find reasons to be motivated. And it wanes here and there, right? But you always have to find a reason to get back to it. When I communicate my higher power, or I'm in groups like MPB or Rising Man, and I'm around these guys and I get that boost, it's like, I remember why, because I sometimes we forget a little bit, right? That spiritual connection to that co-creation is so powerful, in the sense that when you co-create a space like that, right, and that energy of motivation comes through and flows into you, and you can really harness that, right? Recharge your batteries a little bit. It's like, I can go out here and I can get after the week and I can get stuff done. And a lot of guys don't have that, right? They don't build that area for themselves to recharge. Sometimes, life beats you down, man. You're not supposed to do it on your own. You are not supposed to do this thing called life on your own. And a lot of guys, especially younger guys, feel like it's all on their shoulders, it's all on their back, and they got to do it by themselves. And if you don't have a higher power or a group of guys behind you, that shit's hard, man. That is so hard to go out there and do, right? Self love and fulfillment, I definitely think, is part of being in a group, right? Like, or a team, or whatever you want to call it. I know Rising Man doesn't like to use the word group, but a team of guys is so intentional, in the sense that you can build that fulfillment with them, that accountability to, like, I have to, sometimes have a little kick in the ass to get going. Because I think, as humans, it's pretty natural to want to be like, I'll do it another day. I'll do it another day, right? And you put it off and you put it off. And if you don't ever really feel like that sense of urgency, because it's hard to build. It's not natural to build that, right? It does take a little bit of time, especially when you're younger, to be like, I'll stay home from the bars on the weekend. I won't chase the girls, right? I'm going to actually start to build this fulfillment, because you have to sacrifice something to start to build it, right? And I see a lot of guys, like you said, they'll get that consciousness and fall right back into the same pattern of behavior, right? Whether it be a breakup, whether it be a job, whether it be sobriety, like, it's right back in the same comfortable patterns, because breaking out is so painful to really chase after that fulfillment. I think a lot of it comes from the lack of self-worth or self-belief that they can actually co-create this in their life, right? So I think I kind of want to end with, what is so different about building fulfillment with others as compared to yourself? And then on top of that, like, for breakup, for example, what are some steps guys can take after a breakup, right? We heard being alone, right? But besides that, because I think a lot of guys will go to the bar, get on, get with another girl, drink. But, like,
Mhm.
what are healthy growth behaviors guys can do after a breakup to really feel that pain, process that pain, and then go out and find someone, better after you have gone through this experience?
Yeah, so with the inner and outer fulfillment, I think it's easy to build the outer fulfillment on relationships outside of you. Um, I know I've done that for a lot of life, even with friends back in high school, as opposed to seeking inwards. And I don't think we're ever necessarily taught to find the fulfilling state inside of us. So I think build that inwards, work on that, and you can also start to create fulfilling relationships outside of you. Um, it's great to have the inside. That's pivotal. It's like the number one. But at the same time, you can be creating fulfilling relationships outside of you. Um, the relationship you have with your significant other is going to be one of the most important relationships you ever make in your life. If you ever feel like you're settling, if you ever feel like they're holding you back or anything, like, it's really time to reevaluate and have that conversation. And relationships always grow. They either grow together or they grow apart. And not everyone in life is growth oriented. There are some people who are they're going to work the same job the rest of their life, and that's their lifestyle, and they just want a 9 to 5 and all this. Absolutely no hate. No hate. Some people don't have any focus on growth or anything. Those probably aren't the people listening to your podcast, but there are people like that. And it's possible to find yourself in a relationship with someone like that. And they can be a friend, whatever, if it's aligned, if it makes sense. But your significant other's got to be someone who's going to be on a very similar frequency as you. And when they notice you start to fall down, they lift you up, they help you, they support you in all that you do, they empower you. So that's the number one most important relationship. Outside of that, friends, family, everyone, fulfillment in those areas is going to be finding people that align with you in whatever respect they are. You know, I have friends that are simply recreational friends. I don't go to them for deep, meaningful conversations, but I'll hit them up to go play basketball. That's what we do together. And so you can have different friends from different areas, and they fulfill different needs within your life. Not in a sense that you use them or anything, but they just serve different purposes with you, which is totally okay. But definitely start inward. And if you're in a relationship or anything like that, it's not too late to start building that. Like, you can always start building the inside. And as you build the inside, it might start to transform the way you look at the outside. So be ready for that potential. Steps after a breakup. I've made one YouTube video. That was the first one. Really important. So I broke it out into like 4 principles. The first principle is understanding. And that is, understand that it's going to be painful. Whether you broke up with the other person or not, whether they broke up with you, it's going to be painful if you loved them. I suppose there's very rare instances where it's easy to just let go, like, oh, we're not aligned anymore, let's go our own ways. That's very rare. If you love someone and they were a pivotal part of your life, like they were your partner, they were probably the most important person in your life, and they're no longer in that role, that is hard. So understand that it's going to be hard. And also understand that it comes in waves. I've had, Friday, it was a month out, and I thought I had already hit my bottom. And Friday was freaking tough, man. And just knowing that it's coming in waves is such a big piece in it. Because if you think it's just going to be this journey upwards and healing, if I didn't know any better and Friday happened, I'd be sitting there and I would make the state even worse, because I'd be like, oh my God, I thought I was over this. Oh, it's coming back and all this. And you'll just dig that hole deeper. And you're going to make the waves way bigger. So understand it's coming in waves. Understand it's not some straight line, not a linear process. It comes in waves, and it's going to be tough. So understand those 2 things. And just in that, it's gonna help you. Second principle is acceptance. So first off, accept that the breakup is over. And I spent some time trying to, fix it or say things or manipulate it in some way to get it to come back together, in all reality. And in those states, you're not accepting. It's back to that control. And I realized I was doing that, and I just had to stop, and I had to put my hands up and accept, okay, this is over. It doesn't mean it could never happen again. I love this person. We're not ending on we hate each other. We both still greatly care about each other, but as of right now, it's over. So accept that. I know some people aren't as fortunate. Some people end up in, drastic situations. But if you just went through a breakup, accept that it's over. Stop trying to put it back together. If it needs to be forced to be put back together, if you have to say one right thing in order for it to work, then that's a fragile vase, man. It's not going to last. You guys got to take some time apart, and if things work in that time apart to realign you, maybe it's possible, but accept it. The second part of acceptance is accepting the feelings. And we talked briefly about this earlier, but you have to feel the feelings. You are going to have sadness, anger, grief, all kinds of emotions, and you can escape and you can avoid, but it doesn't get rid of those feelings. Those feelings are going to be processed at one point or another in your life, and you can choose it the day it happens. And that can simply look like, a heavy sadness is coming up. Go lay on the ground and cry your eyes out. Let it the hell out. Journal about what you need to journal about. Let the emotions spread throughout your body. Let it make its way. Your body's going to do what it wants to do. And it's not easy. And it's funny because, especially men, we're looked at as weak for feeling our feelings. When all of us go through shit. Some of us are really good at masking it, but we all go through points of sadness where all we want to do is cry. And we're weak if we do that, but one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life was on those dark days, just sitting there and letting that pain just ride through my body and just feel it and cry. Fuck, that was hard. That was some of the hardest shit I've ever done in my life. It is 10 times easier to go to your local bar, start chugging away, and forget that. And that doesn't get rid of it. That just prolongs it. And then, it comes up again the next day. I got to find another way to escape. And then eventually you might bury it down so far that it doesn't reappear till later in the future in the form of trauma. And then it just keeps getting processed in the form of trauma whenever something's triggered that brings that back up. And it doesn't leave your body. Your emotions have to make their round through their body and it be expressed in one way or another. So accept that and let those emotions be expressed. And it's hard. Hopefully you have people you can do that with. If not, do it with yourself. If you need any support in that, reach out to me. But it's pivotal to accept that. The third part is to lean into the love that is in the situation. In my situation, we still have a platonic love, me and my ex, and there's still love there. Most people don't have that, and I understand that. But if you have that, you can lean into that. And she was there for me in emotional times. I was there for her. And it's a weird dynamic, but we made it work. Some people don't have that. So lean into the outside love. Do you have any friends or family that you can go and fully open up with? And I realized more than ever how people were actually there for me. I think the brotherhood came into my life at the exact right time because I don't think I would have got to this breakup nearly as well as I did. I had a friend staying with me the week after, ironic timing. I had a coach who's been phenomenal in the process. I have family. I have friends. I had a lot of support, and that was great. So I leaned into the love when I really needed it. But for me personally, I felt like a lot of that needed to be processed on my own. The next level of letting the love in was to lean into the self-love. This time can be hands down one of the most transformational times in your entire life. But that can be made from a place of lack, or that can be made from a place of love. And I've seen some pages on Instagram. There are coaches. I don't know the names or anything. I don't know if they call themselves a breakup coach, but one guy would coach people on how to win their ex back. And part of what he talked about was go to the gym and get like the dream body, make her jealous, make her all that. That is such a place of lack and fear, and so wrong. Like if you build your foundation on trying to prove something to someone or win someone over or make someone regret, like that's a foundation built on, sticks. But if you are like, I want to pour into myself, I want to feel better than I've ever felt, I want to wake up every morning alive with energy, just excited, I want to be able to, for me, I got my first backflip and my first muscle up. Those have been on my goals all year. I got them in 2 weeks after the breakup because I was like, fuck, I'm going to start pouring into me. Felt amazing. And it was because I leaned into the love of myself. So pour into your self-love with yourself, but make sure it's from a place of love and not trying to prove something or make someone regret, because that's not right. The foundation is in self-love when it's made of cement. The last part is trust and surrender. And man, is this the hardest one. The masculine wants to control. The masculine wants to force situations. The feminine is really flowy, and the feminine likes to go with the flow. Men like to be the rock and women like to be the water. And all of us have the masculine and feminine inside of us, and we need to let those energies balance out. And for me, I had to put my hands up, completely surrender, step back, and say, okay, there are some things that are not going to change. And it's kind of the next level of accepting. It's trusting, because you can accept it's over and still sit in that grief and all that. But when you transform, you make that switch in your mind, you say, I'm going to trust that this is happening for a reason. It's not easy. It doesn't make it easy. But when you can just make that switch, and I'm not saying it's easy, but when you do that, you can start to see all these things in your life, and you actually start to have a lot more gratitude. You're not playing the victim card. This is happening to me. It's all coming at me. It's all, why me, why me? Instead, you take your power back and you say, this is happening for me. Let me find the good in this situation. How is this working for me? How is this serving me? This isn't to be confused with blind optimism. Some people simply say, and I used to be the exact same way, like, oh, just look at the good side of things, oh, you're single now, you get to go out and go on dating, like, and that was fun when you did it, right? No, like, you still have these feelings, you still got to do all that. But when you trust, you can get a little bit of gratitude squeezed in there, and you can start to, from a higher standpoint, step into your higher conscious and be like, how is this serving Anthony? And you'll start to notice things that when you're tapped in, when you're really connecting, and I'd recommend daily meditative practices. When you're getting into that subconscious state and all that, and you can step back and see it, I started to see things happening for me that I don't think I've ever seen before. And I have built a stronger connection with God in the last 2 months, when a lot of people that I've spoke with actually start to question any divinity in the world. Oh, God wouldn't do this to me. God wouldn't that. A lot of people in times of hardship, they either build a stronger relationship with God and the divinity, or they completely like tear it down because how could this happen to me? And so there's two approaches. And whether you're religious or not, just take the aspect of finding how this happened for you is hands down a much better way to live your life. And simply being in that state of mind where you're looking for that is going to create that energy that's going to be attracting more of that, as opposed to the energy of why did this happen to me, and you start attracting more of that. So I know that was a long one, but I was pretty passionate about that video, and those were 4 tips that, or principles, have radically transformed the way that I got through this, because it's been a month. Month and a half ago, I thought for sure we're getting married. So it was hard as hell. Still is hard, but it could be so much worse. And I've seen some dark days with people, and it breaks my heart. I've seen some people, a year after the breakup, and every day they say they wake up and they live in misery. And I'm very fortunate I haven't had that experience. So those principles are what got me to the state of being that I've been living in.
Anthony Messina, everyone, dude, love your work. Really appreciate you coming on. Why don't you tell people what you got going on, where they can keep up with you?
Yeah, so I might hopefully be changing it soon, but as of right now, Instagram, Anthony Messina Official. Same thing on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook. But Instagram is going to be the place to check it out. Got some free stuff in the bio. Apply for a free coaching session. If I resonate with you, hop on a call. Self-discovery and guide in there to help people with values and beliefs. So everything right now, my link in bio is all free value. So check that out and follow me there.
Awesome, man. Appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, brother.
Yep. All right. We will see you all next time.
All right. Thank you, brother.